Mysterious origins, some of it involving Lupercalia and drunken
Supposedly.
priests whipping people with dead flesh. This is
Uh,
a holiday right there.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, there's there's yes and no. The truth is that people have been asking how the hell did Valentine's Day start even 300 years ago, and they couldn't figure it out.
Okay.
But we have some modern scholarship where we think we're getting closer to what's going on, and I've got my own theory that I think is the that makes the most sense.
All right. So enlighten me, Philip. Valentine's Day starts with, from best of what I've found, this holiday called Lupercalia that the Romans did. And supposedly, what would happen is some priests would get drunk, skin an animal, and then after walking counterclockwise around a hill, would flog people with the dead flesh of the animal to help increase their fertility. And somehow that, and then Roman convergence over to Christianity and Valentine's death somehow translate into this romantic chocolate giving holiday.
Well, the truth might be a little bit more complex even than that. Uh,
Okay, I
that's the
like
good news.
this.
The good news is that it's even crazier than that. Yes. So back in the late 17, early 1800s, people were drawing the connection between this ancient Roman feast of Lupercalia and celebration of Valentine's Day or Valentine's Eve, because they had both variations then. The idea being that this Roman holiday of fertility somehow turned into a Christian feast marked by the martyrdom of Saint Valentine, which there were actually three Saint Valentines, and there's one specific one. I think it's Saint Valentine of Rome that this particular one would be about. But the calendar, it turns out, doesn't actually match up entirely. Um, and when they were talking, and when they had feast days, it wasn't always in ancient Rome. It wasn't always on one specific day. Sometimes it could bleed over. And you also have to keep in mind that there were multiple calendars over the course of Western history. We've got the Julian calendar, the Gregorian calendar, and a date in one calendar may be a totally different month in another calendar. So it is a really so that's the first theory. The first theory is that it is Lupercalia that after the conversion of the Roman Empire to Christianity, that it was pasted over with the feast of a early Christian martyr saint, and then that over time developed into a celebration of romantic love. But the curious thing is, why is Valentine's Day not such a big deal in continental Europe, in Italy, in France, in places where Catholicism, the Church, has been in power since Constantine the Great. You know, why do we find it mostly in the English speaking in England and in America? And that is because the Valentine's Day of romance really didn't start with ancient Rome and did not start with Roman Christian Rome. This is the new theory. The new theory is that it actually started off as an English celebration, celebrating the beginning of spring, that then crossed over into America in the early 19th century and turned into what it is today. And let me explain a little bit why. So the reason it's confusing too is because there are a lot of little things in the story of the ancient Roman Saint Valentine that actually do accord with this. He supposedly this was during the great persecution. So Diocletian and a couple of different Roman emperors around the third and fourth centuries, they persecuted Christians a lot, and they had their civil rights taken away. They weren't permitted to participate in society the same way that other Roman citizens were allowed to. And this is the whole, being persecuted. There's a lot of martyrs in the Catholic Church from this period. But one Christian, I think, cleric, part of the clergy, is his name was Valentine, and what he became known for, whether it's totally true or not, is, who totally knows. But from the lives of the saints that we read, is that he would marry Christians secretly. So and he would also marry soldiers secretly to their wives, because the theory was that in this time in the Roman Empire, it was considered a bad idea to let soldiers marry, because a married soldier with a family isn't going to be as good of a soldier as a single man. But if you were in love and you wanted to marry, apparently this guy, Saint Valentine, would marry you, under the cover of darkness. And part of his legend too is that he wore a ring with a stone with an image of Cupid, and that passing him in the street, when you saw this ring, you would know that's the guy. That's like his secret symbol, his little bat signal, telling people, I'm the guy you come to. So come to me if you want to get married. And another part of the legend, which is also, accords with our idea of Valentine's Day, is that he would give people a remembrance of God's love and of their duty. And it would come in the form of a cutout heart shape. So this is part of why it is very this is part of why it makes a lot of sense to think that there's a direct connection between Saint Valentine's Day, and what we now celebrate in the West as Valentine's Day. But the problem is that we lose the connections. Somewhere the connection between an actual celebration of love becomes lost, because the first actual reference in literature that we know of, reference to Valentine's Day as a day of celebrating love and not the death of a martyr, doesn't happen until the Middle Ages. We have a poem, I think, from France in the 14th or 15th century, talking about a feast that was held on in honor of Saint Valentine's Day, and something to maidens and lords and jousts, and this is the era of the troubadour and the courtly love, the idea of courtly love.
And quickly, what was a troubadour during the medieval period?
A troubadour was a singer, a musician who, it started in the Provençal region of France, and they sang songs and wrote poems that became kind of what we identify with the medieval idea of courtly love, which usually it doesn't mean actual love. It's this idealized, it can never be love between a knight and a fair maiden. That whole idea we get from the Middle Ages really comes from the literature and the music of the troubadours. So that's the curious thing to me, is why do we have this big break between Saint Valentine and Saint Valentine's Day, established as a feast day, as a saint day? Why do we have this large, this capacious gap in the record? And part of why I think we have that is because the first real practices that we associate with Valentine's Day, sending letters with poems, to giving them to people and giving people gifts and candies and stuff, really starts in England in the early modern period. So this is, early modern period means basically Henry VIII, Shakespeare, Elizabeth I, Ben Jonson, King James. We're talking the period just before the settlement of America, and just after what's considered the Renaissance. And that's really where we first see references to these things. We see a reference in Chaucer, who he comes at the high Middle Ages, but the actual practices we don't see until about the 1600s. And what they are, part of the scholarship that leans in this direction, that it really started in England much later than all the other stuff that happened in ancient Rome, is that it had to do with birds. That around February is when you would start to see, this is before global warming and seasons changing and all that kind of stuff. The idea is that in February, it's been a long winter, but now things are starting to thaw and birds are starting to make nests together, which is very symbolic of love, of family, of, you know, creating eggs, creating a home, this, a relationship, a man and wife. You can see the connection here. And the idea is that you would start to see that around February. And this connection between the beginning of spring, birds coming together to make nests around the same time uh, as what was traditionally celebrated as Saint Valentine's um, Saint Day, feast day. Uh, this really is where everything totally starts to come together. And this practice basically stayed in England until in America around the early 1800s. There are notices. I've actually got an excerpt from a newspaper here from 1829. We have been requested to state for the benefit of this inquiring age the origin and antiquity of the celebration of St. Valentine's Day or St. Valentine's Eve, a celebration which appears to have experienced such a revival during the last few years in several of our cities and country villages. So this for an American felt quite new. And this is something that was a very English custom. And so seeing yourself as an American, having an American culture, America had been divorced from England for a couple decades by this point. And so they could really look at something coming from England as something foreign. And really, I mean, it could be argued that at any point during American colonial history, even when we were part of the British Empire, that something coming from England, a person coming from England, could be seen as someone foreign because of how distant the two lands were, because of the differences in American and English culture that had developed since, Jamestown on.
Yeah, there wasn't this consistent communication like we have today. It was if you lived, even though you and I live in two different states that are right next to each other, um, if a month had passed, whatever went on would be news to me. Or
Yeah,
fashion
exactly.
change where you live compared to where I live, it would seem completely foreign.
Exactly. Especially with the huge amounts of time you're talking about. If you wanted to go to England back then, it would take you probably 2 months on a ship. And that's, I can imagine traveling for more than a day at a time. I hate traveling. As a sidebar. So yeah, I wouldn't have been one of those people trying to go back and forth too frequently. So it was seen as an English custom that had started to be adopted by Americans, because like we talked about last time when we were talking about the origins of Christmas and the modern development of Christmas, Americans loved new things and they loved trends and they loved fads. And if it seemed fun and new and interesting, they glommed onto it. And part of that was St. Valentine's Day. I realize it's been going on for a while, so let's we can take a moment to discuss if you like, because I can go on.
No worries. Okay, so Valentine's is new. Valentine's so it sounded like it did have some sort of English origins in the way that we know of it today. But America, when it was a new country, kind of jumped on these things. It was like, hey, let's indulge a little bit.
Right, because think about it. If you're living in the early 1800s, it's been a long winter. It's fucking cold. Sorry, it's I don't know.
You're allowed to swear on here. Yeah,
Oh,
so
okay.
anyway, it'd be cold as fuck. It's not like today where it's like 50 something
It's 50
degrees out
degrees
in
outside.
January.
Exactly.
This is absurd. 10 years ago or more, it would be like 3.5 feet of snow and like 0 degrees.
Exactly. Exactly.
And so,
So, but especially back then, you're even talking not just pre global warming. You're also talking the Little Ice Age that lasted from 1300 to the through the 1800s. You're talking about in the context of even in the absence of global warming, an extraordinarily cold period in geological history. So winter was cold, man, and Christmas has been over for 2 months. You need something to look forward to. You need something to hope for. And when you've been bundled up and kind of, because most people did agricultural work back then, unless they lived in a city, most people were farmers to some extent. And, you still have work to do on the farm during the winter, but it's much less. Otherwise, you're keeping warm, you're sitting put, you're reading the Bible, you, and if you're young and single, you need something to look forward to, man. You got to go out and meet some people. You want to meet some young men, you want to meet some young women. And this was the perfect excuse to get dressed up, get cleaned up, get out there, even if it's still, a foot of snow or whatever, get out there and get out into society and have a little bit of fun. Have a feast, have a have parties, slip letters to local girls that you think are interesting, and maybe open up a conversation. They might be interested in you, and that could be marriage. Which so I think it makes total sense why uh, young, hot-blooded American people would want to adopt something like this from England.
okay. And now what was it like when it started? Like today, Valentine's is like surf and turf or some romantic themed something that would be associated with romance. I saw a recent menu for somewhere, and it's like I have no idea if this is what all the young cool people think is romantic nowadays, but there's a specialized Valentine's menu, and
Right,
everybody typically wears red and black or red with white, trying to look all
right.
nice and fancy. We give each other secret letters. We buy lots of candy. Russell Stover's #1 day of the year.
I'm the
I
one
sell
day of the
more
year. That's
chocolate
right.
than anywhere else.
Big day
Uh,
for the candy industry. That's right.
yeah. So, I mean, like, was candy something that was associated with it at the beginning? Was it a different feast theme? Like, did
At the
people
very begin the fundamental thing was letters. It was very like, especially in England before it even caught on in America, the fundamental thing was Valentine's cards, Valentine's letters. These were usually handwritten, and around the early 1800s, the the cost of postage went down in England, and it led to this huge boom in people sending even more, and so it caught on even more in England. And then they introduced the postage stamp, which made it even easier and even cheaper for people to quickly send letters um, for Valentine's Day. And you could send it, you wouldn't have to just hand it to someone in the neighborhood. You could send it to the other side of the country if you wanted. And in America, this all coincided with the beginning of the Industrial Revolution as well. Um, so it was cards and it was gifts too. I think there was small gifts. Some people would give, they would send lace. Lace was very, lace is a very laborious thing to make. That young girls usually would spend whole days, whole weeks doing. Even after school or after work, they would go inside and they would sit by the fire and they'd make lace. They would send little gifts. They would send gloves. I think that was a thing, or small treats. But the idea of the candy box didn't come quite yet, until actually that started in England too, but it also really caught on in America. But the card thing was very, very important. That was a very central part of Valentine's Day, and it didn't start to become the big industry until I think the 1830s, 1840s, when a young woman, I have to look up her name real quick right now. Her name is Esther Howland. And so in 1847, the first mass-produced Valentines of embossed paper lace were produced and sold shortly after 1847 by Esther Howland of Worcester, Mass. So this woman's father owned a book and stationery store, but according to this source, Howland took her inspiration from an English Valentine she had received from a business associate of her father. And intrigued with the idea of making similar Valentines, she began her business by importing paper, lace, and floral decorations from England. And so she and others in this time started the practice of mass producing Valentine's cards. So now you could print it, you could just, write a little thing to the person and sign your name, send it off. So this made it very easy for the average American who didn't even grow up with this tradition to quickly get in on it. You just buy it, sign your name, send it off. And now you're a part of the celebrating of Valentine's Day. And this is what helped it catch on. Just like with
Awesome.
just like with Christmas, the Industrial Revolution helped make it basically easy for people to buy and send things and mail things. And it's all that thanks to capitalism, it's what it's all about. But the candy aspect of it that we understand, that we know about, that was also helped along by mass production. In 1861 is where we get the first heart-shaped box of chocolates. The classic Valentine's gift to your loved one is a heart-shaped box full of chocolates of different flavors. And this was actually invented by Richard Cadbury, who was the son of the founder of the Cadbury Chocolate Company, John Cadbury. And he invented this fancy heart-shaped box and red and, with probably little, decorations on it as a kind of a unique, fun way to increase sales. And what do you know? It's heart-shaped, it's romance themed, and it's delicious and tasty. It's a nice gift, and that's one way to get somebody's attention too. And that's also one way that, in a time before, in a time where, the idea of having sweets and chocolates, was no longer something just for the wealthy. This was something that you could go to a store and buy. You didn't have to be rich enough to have a cook or a baker make it for you in your, in your massive kitchen. This was really, really exciting. This was a time when people were excited to have to be able to have large quantities of sugar. This is a time when people were excited to have like gelatin, like little gelatin sheets
Yeah.
that people put in stuff.
Yeah. Now Jello.
Like Jello. Yeah, exactly. That idea that was that took hours and hours and hours of boiling down, hooves and bones and stuff to try to create gelatin. So that kind of thing was something that only the rich usually ate. But the second industrial revolution made it so that a lot of these things that were associated with the rich were more easily available and were cheaper. So more people could buy them. So people could buy chocolates where 2 generations earlier that was kind of that was not available. And so that's also why, just like with Christmas, the 19th century and the Industrial Revolution is a key part in not only making something iconic with lots of products associated with it, a lot of branding, but also just its accessibility and its cheapness, so that more and more people can buy into it and enjoy it.
Yeah. Were people at this time like what were their views on in this holiday?
Views as in were there people who thought that it was sacrilegious or
Yeah, like what was the general reaction like? Was it something popular amongst young people? Was it an old and young people holiday? Was this excitable? Was this were people not sure how they felt about this? Or was this one of those things where off the bat people were like, hell yeah, I definitely want this Valentine's Day holiday thing to be a thing. I like it.
I think the same way with a lot of fads. I think there were people who were like, "Oh, that's weird that people are all of a sudden doing this. Why? Why would they? Why would? Why are they getting? I don't get it, but good for them. I'm sure that there were some people who were, maybe kind of kind of fuddy duddies about it, and they're being sticks in the mud and saying, that's not for me. That's something that the kids are doing. But I think just like with any fed, while you have those people, you have other people who go, yeah, that's fun, and it makes sense. Like I said before, this is a time of year you need something to look forward to, and if you're a young person and you're living in a pre-internet, mass communication age, and most people are, if you don't live in a city, you live miles away from most people. Um, any excuse to celebrate any excuse to celebrate romance and create an excuse to get people together and hang out and foster intergender relations, they're going to be all for it because horniness is a major factor in history that a lot of people don't talk about. The sex drive is such a crucial part of history, and I think that there need to be more. Um, I don't know what you would call it, psychosexual or psychological sexual interpretations of history, of events, of things like that, because I think when you when you relegate when you relegate emotions and when you relegate sex to either art or particular individuals that were famous for, Casanova, that kind of thing, or Marquis de Sade, when you keep it there, you ignore the fact that history is full of humans, and these were not figures in oil paintings. These were not statues and busts. These were people like you and me who had blood, who had hearts, who had hair, who smelled bad, who had to, get dressed in the morning and go off and do stuff. And the fact that they lived 100 years ago or 1,000 years ago or 10,000 years ago doesn't make a difference. Um, they may live in a different culture, they have a different language, they have different viewpoints, but certain basic things really don't change from culture to culture. Um, so I think that Valentine's Day's popularity um, was well founded, and I think that it was destined to take hold, especially in
It's all about bitches and bling at the end of the day.
America. But I'd want to do more research on this Roman connection because it's what we started off with, and like my first reaction was, oh, but actually maybe it's not that. But it's really difficult to ignore all of these earlier pagan because
Cultures.
these pagan influences. But it's just if you want to go purely by data and you want to go purely by what things connect to other things, there are some trails that kind of have dead ends, and there are some trails that lead into that things don't always connect, and they don't always connect for to the satisfaction of some people. Some people are satisfied. In fact, uh, this early um, this early newspaper article from the Aurora and Pennsylvania Gazette from 1829. Their first, what they said that like actually the writing is the feast corresponding with our Saint Valentine's Day was called Lupercalia by the Romans. Many of them were uncouth and barbarous, and though congenial to that age. So they go on to talk about how it must be the continuation of some ancient Roman thing. So if they thought that there was something to it, uh, then maybe there was, and maybe somehow something kind of got lost and it became part of the undercurrent of some understanding of what the holiday and what should be going on around the same time. And then coincidentally, the English started doing their thing, and they either missed each other or they conjoined. But I'd like to do more research on that to try to get to the bottom of that, because I do think that there might be some connection, though if we're strictly going by what we understand as St. Valentine's Day and all the celebrations that we accord with it, it's tough to go much further back than England in the 1500s. But that's a whole book. That's a whole book that could be written about that.
That's a whole separate book. It's gonna be a whole separate series. Philip investigates the Roman origins of Valentine's Day.
Shh, Archie, hush.
Archie agrees.
Archie agrees.
He
Here,
thinks it's a
here.
great idea. But yeah, that is overall that is really unique to see how also too how adaptive the human imagination is with creating new things. And but I do have one last question. Were there feasts in the 1800s? Were there Valentine's feasts? There used to be before, but was there still like the whole feasting concept? Let's get together and have a big old feast.
Well, I do have something called a reference to something called a bachelor's ball. This is 1830. So the idea was that there were a bunch of bachelors.
Hmm.
So here's the quote: "Around the room were assembled the gay youth, the lovely maiden, the venerable parent. Uh, to them it was amusement and sport, not so to the poor bachelors." It's taking a humorous view that, oh no, they have to get married off to women. They won't be able to hang out with the bros anymore. They were losing their comrades by that fell ravager upon single blessedness, matrimony. So the idea was that their strength and mastered take the wine and victuals and provide the music, and another to decorate the ballroom of the city hotel, another to prepare badges and devices, another to get up tickets and small arrangements. The beauty and splendor, the neatness and elegance of the occasion are to be a superior order to any preceding one. We give the ladies fair warning to hold themselves in readiness for the picked youth of the city, such as will make loving husbands, kind fathers, and happy grandfathers, are to be present, if God prosper them. So the idea of it being an occasion to hold basically a party, kind of almost like the male version of a debutante's ball, or what's the southern thing that they call it, where young ladies come out to meet society and announce that they're ready to meet a man to get married. What do they call that? Cotillion? I think it's called a cotillion, something like that. But yeah, but the idea that, all right, so here we are, we're all single, y'all are single, let's come hang out. So that's from 1830. So at least at that point they were looking at it as an opportunity to bust out the drinks and get all dressed up and hit the
Get
town.
some wedding rings on some fingers.
Yeah, yeah. If we're lucky or unlucky, as they make it out today.
Yeah. All right. So thank you, Philip. And
Thank you very much.
got any
Thank you for having me.
last words on Valentine's?
Don't be so quick to discount something that's fun. I know there's a lot of people who are critical of Valentine's Day. I'm single, or oh, it's just a stupid commercial holiday. It's just an excuse to sell more candy. I encourage people to look at every opportunity to have fun as an opportunity to have fun, and not to just discount it and be jaded and cynical. Go out and have fun.